Urban legends are just stories to scare kids and nothing more. However, there's a small percent of urban legends that are true and that have happened to real people, and that's what we're going to be talking about today. Hey YouTube, I'm Courtney McGinley and welcome back to the most amazing top 5. Sit back, subscribe, and let me entertain you. Before we get started, I want to know, what's the scariest thing that's ever happened to you? Let me know your answers down in the comments. Also, let's try and see if we can get this video to 300 likes. I know you guys can do it. Alright, let's get started on a list of the top 5 urban legends that are true part 2. Coming in our number 5 spot, killer living in your home. Now this one is super creepy. It's about a killer who actually secretly lived in the family's home for weeks before killing them. This took place in 1922 in a small isolated farm in Germany. Everything was normal and the family were doing their daily routines when all of a sudden things just started to vanish with no explanation. Keys went missing, objects would not be in their usual spot, and weird footprints were spotted around their land. Then one night the family began to hear footsteps in their attic. But for whatever reason, they didn't think much of it, and they just ignored it. But they probably should have checked it out, because a week later, the husband, wife, daughter, 2 grandchildren, and the maid were brutally killed by an axe-wielding maniac. And it just so happens he was living in their attic. The family's bodies were discovered 4 days later, and until this day, no one knows who the killer was. Coming in our number 4 spot, the Pigpen of Death. Turns out some pigs are as into eating us as we are into eating them. In Oregon, a Vietnam War vet started to raise pigs as a form of treatment for his post-traumatic stress disorder. Things were going great and the pigs were a huge distraction. But then one day in 2012, this man went to feed his pigs and never came back. His family went out to look for him, and when they got to the pen, all they saw were his dentures, a few pieces of fabric, and flesh. It's unclear what exactly happened. Maybe the man had a heart attack, or maybe the pigs were just hungry. But whatever reason, these pigs devoured him. At number 3, woman with headache discovers unwelcome guest in her brain. A 31-year-old woman went on a sunny vacation to Mexico and had a blast. She came back and everything was fine for about 2 years, but then she began suffering from severe headaches and vision problems. She went to see a doctor and they told her she had translucent jelly-like sacs sitting on her brain. And if it's possible to get any worse, each of these contained a baby tapeworm. The doctors informed her it was likely she picked up the parasite during her trip to Mexico. Which, when you think about it, is super creepy because she had gone to Mexico 2 years prior. So basically this parasite was just sitting on her brain for 2 years. And at number 2, man checks malfunctioning oven and gets trapped inside. One day a huge industrial oven in a British factory just stopped working. So a supervisor decided to inspect it. He jumped inside and began to check it out. But what he didn't know was another worker actually fixed it just minutes earlier. The same employee returned shortly after, and not knowing anyone was inside, he turned the oven back on. And to make matters worse, this man was engaged to the supervisor's daughter. So basically he just set his father-in-law on fire. Now you might think there was a small chance of him getting out or screaming for help, but unfortunately once the oven is turned on, the doors automatically slam shut and lock, so no one would have been able to hear him. His body was only discovered after employees noticed smoke blowing out of the oven. And in our number 1 spot, the legend of Charlie No Face. This is a legend from Pittsburgh, so if you grew up there, it's likely you know about it. Charlie was said to have lost his face because he was foolishly playing near power lines. Charlie was known to wander in dark alleyways and deserted countrysides during nightfall looking for children. At least, that was the legend anyway. But it turns out Charlie's real name was actually Raymond Robinson, and he was a man who was cursed with a deformed skull-like face. Before his deformity in 1919, young Raymond was horsing around with some of his friends on a local electrified trolley bridge. Of course, fooling around with electricity, he got hurt. Raymond got a dose of 1,200 volts, which scorched his face like a blowtorch. Here's an idea of what he looked like. His eyes were scorched into their sockets, his nose was burnt off, and his left arm was destroyed up to his elbow. But through all of this, he somehow survived. For the remainder of his life, he basically lived in solitude, only leaving the house at nighttime because he didn't want to scare the children. And that's how the legend started. And there you have it, that's a list of the top 5 urban legends that are true part 2. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.